Alright, sexual roleplay and fantasizing. I'm going to include both of these in the same presentation because they're very similar and you cannot really separate them. One is indulging a sexual fantasy in your mind, and the other is indulging that sexual fantasy in your mind and then actually acting it out with another person. But before I go further, I'm going to read to you from Proverbs 6. This is verses 16 through 19. These 6 things doth the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him. A proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood. A heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among brethren. So a heart that deviseth wicked imaginations. An example of this would be indulging a sexual fantasy of adultery, where you're having sex with somebody that's not your spouse. This is wrong. And if you take that a step further, and you're indulging this illegal sexual fantasy, and then you act it out with your spouse, even though it is your spouse, because you're fantasizing that it's not your spouse, you're indulging a wicked imagination. It's sinful. God hates it. It's an abomination. Now, the only way that I know that you can indulge a sexual fantasy that would not be sinful is if you're indulging that fantasy where with your, where it is your spouse in your mind, right? And you don't modify them. Because usually when people indulge a sexual fantasy, they modify their spouse to be a little bit tweaked and a better version, so to speak, of what they already are, but it's actually no longer your spouse. You've changed them in your fantasy because, it's more appealing to you, but that wouldn't be acceptable. Now, all things considered, once you apply all this, there's not really that much left to what you can role play about. It needs to be your spouse, right? So what can really change? The only things I can really see changing are things like, okay, so you're both the same people, you both have the same sexual tastes and preferences and so forth, but maybe you live in a different place, you have different roles, different jobs and so forth. So yeah, that could be a sexual role play that would be non-sinful, and you could do that, but a lot of people may not even be interested in that. Because it's not meeting the level of, the degree of, they're not finding it at the same degree of pleasure that they would in the sinful fantasy where they're actually having sex with a stranger or pretending like it's a stranger when it's really their spouse. So yeah, that's pretty much it. There's not that much role play that would really be appealing to many people once you remove the sinful stuff from it. But if you find a non-sinful version and you want to indulge in a sexual fantasy, either it's just in your mind or if you want to act it out together in that fantasy with your spouse, as long as it's not sinful, as long as you're not modifying them or pretending like they are somebody that they're not, then you should be just fine. So thanks for watching. We'll see you again in the next presentation.